Accidental trespass. The vast emptiness of space stretched before the UES Odyssey, stars glittering like distant beacons in the darkness. Captain Ilara Reed stood on the bridge, her gray eyes fixed on the holographic display hovering above the central console. The ship had been exploring the edges of the Orion Arm for 2 months, pushing the boundaries of human expansion further into the unknown. Captain, we're detecting unusual energy signatures at coordinates 371 to 842.93. Lieutenant Zoe Torres announced, her fingers dancing across her console. They don't match any known natural phenomenon or human technology. Ilara straightened, tucking the strand of her silver-streaked auburn hair behind her ear. Put it on the main display. The hologram shifted, revealing the strange warping of space approximately a quarter light-year away. The energy patterns pulsed in a rhythmic sequence that seemed artificial in its precision. Analysis, Dr. Okafor? Ilara asked, turning to her science officer. Dr. Namdi Okafor studied his readings intently. It appears to be a stable quantum tunnel, essentially a doorway through space-time. The technology required to create something like this would be, well, centuries beyond our current capabilities. A doorway to where? Ilara asked, her curiosity piqued. Unknown, Captain. Dr. Okafor replied, but the quantum signatures suggest it connects to a location approximately 700 light-years from our current position. Ilara considered this information. The Odyssey was an exploration vessel, tasked with seeking out new phenomena and expanding humanity's understanding of the universe. A quantum tunnel of unknown origin certainly qualified. Recommendations? She asked, looking around at her senior officers. Commander Jack Chen, her first officer, frowned. Protocol would suggest we send in probes first, Captain. I concur, Dr. Okafor added. We have no idea what's on the other side. Ilara nodded. Prepare 3 long-range probes. Full sensor package. Let's see what we're dealing with. The bridge crew moved with practiced efficiency. Within minutes, the probes were launched, disappearing into the shimmering quantum tunnel. Telemetry coming through, Torres reported. The probes have emerged into. It looks like normal space, Captain, but there's something unusual about the stellar configurations. Unusual how? Ilara asked. Dr. Okafor's eyes widened as he analyzed the data. Captain, according to these readings, the stars on the other side don't match any known configuration in our star charts. If these readings are accurate, the tunnel doesn't just bridge distance, it bridges between entirely different regions of the galaxy. A shortcut through the galaxy, Ilara murmured. The implications were enormous. Humanity had been limited by the vast distances between stars, even with their most advanced FTL drives. A network of these tunnels could revolutionize space travel. Wait, Torres said suddenly. I'm detecting artificial structures. Multiple large objects in the vicinity of the tunnel exit. They appear to be ships, Captain. And they're massive. The bridge fell silent. In over a century of space exploration, humanity had found ruins, artifacts, and tantalizing hints of ancient civilizations, but never encountered another spacefaring species. First contact, Chen whispered, voicing what everyone was thinking. Ilara felt the weight of the moment. Her decisions in the next few minutes could shape humanity's relationship with an alien civilization for generations to come. Open a channel on all frequencies, she ordered. Standard first contact protocol. And bring us through the tunnel. Slow approach. Captain, Chen questioned, surprised. The probes made it through safely, Ilara explained. And those ships haven't shown any hostile response to our probes. If we want to establish meaningful communication, we need to show ourselves. The Odyssey moved forward, its quantum drive humming as it entered the tunnel. For a brief, disorienting moment, the view screen showed only swirling energy patterns. Then they emerged on the other side. The sight that greeted them was breathtaking. A vast, organized fleet of vessels hung in space before them. The ships were unlike anything human engineers had conceived. crystalline structures that seemed to shimmer with internal light, geometric patterns that defied conventional aerospace design. Around them, space itself appeared somehow different, more vibrant, as if infused with energy. "We're being scanned," Torres reported. "Multiple directed energy beams, non-damaging." "Maintain position," Ilara ordered. "Continue broadcasting first contact message." The response came almost immediately. The main view screen flickered, and an alien face appeared. The being had an elongated skull with fine, iridescent scales covering pale blue skin. 4 pupilless eyes, arranged in a diamond pattern, regarded them with what seemed like surprise, or perhaps disgust. It was difficult to interpret alien expressions. "Unauthorized vessel," the alien said in perfect English, causing gasps across the bridge. "You have violated sovereign galactic dominion space. Identify your species and point of origin immediately." Ilara maintained her composure despite her shock at hearing the aliens speak their language. "I am Captain Ilara Reed of the United Earth Ship Odyssey. We are explorers from Earth, approaching in peace. We discovered your quantum tunnel and came through seeking peaceful contact." The alien's upper eyes narrowed. "Earth, Sol System, Orion Arm. Classification: Quarantine Zone 937. Developmental monitoring status. Your species is not authorized for interstellar travel beyond your designated sector." Ilara exchanged glances with Chen. "Quarantine zone. Developmental monitoring. I'm afraid I don't understand," she replied carefully. "Humanity has been exploring space for over a century. We've colonized multiple star systems. We were unaware of any restrictions on our movements. Your ignorance of Dominion law does not excuse your violation," the alien stated flatly. "Your civilization has been under observation since your early development. You were not deemed ready for contact with the greater galactic community." Anger flashed through Ilara, though she kept it from showing on her face. "You've been watching us. For how long?" "The Dominion has monitored your species for approximately 3,000 of your years," the alien replied matter-of-factly. "Your development has been unremarkable. Your technological progress is adequate but lacks refinement. Your societal structures are chaotic and inefficient. You have been classified as a Tier 5 species, primitive but with potential for eventual limited integration." Ilara felt her crew's indignation mirroring her own. 3,000 years of secret observation, and they'd been judged without their knowledge or input. "I see," she said, her voice deliberately neutral. "And this Dominion, it controls this entire region of space. The Galactic Dominion encompasses 73% of this galaxy," the alien replied with what sounded like pride. "We maintain order and facilitate the development of lesser species under our guidance. Your unauthorized entry into Dominion space represents a breach of Protocol 3792. We apologize for any inadvertent violation," Ilara said diplomatically. "We were unaware of your existence or your protocols. Now that we are aware, perhaps we could discuss establishing formal diplomatic relations." The alien made a sound that might have been laughter, though it conveyed no warmth. Tier 5 species do not establish diplomatic relations with the Dominion. They receive directives and comply. Your vessel will be escorted back to the quantum tunnel. You will return to your designated development zone and await official contact, which may be granted in approximately 400 of your years should your species demonstrate sufficient advancement. Ilara felt her patience wearing thin. "With all due respect, we're not in the habit of taking orders from civilizations we've just met, regardless of their technological advantages. Humanity determines its own path." The alien's 4 eyes blinked in sequence, suggesting confusion or surprise. "Your compliance is not requested, Captain Reed. It is required. Dominion border vessels are moving to intercept your ship. They will guide you back through the quantum tunnel. Any resistance will be met with appropriate corrective measures." The screen went dark. "3 vessels approaching, Captain," Torres reported. "They're approximately twice our size and heavily armed, based on energy readings." "Options?" Ilara asked, looking around at her senior staff. Chen frowned. We're outgunned and in unknown territory. Protocol would suggest compliance, at least temporarily. Dr. Okafor nodded reluctantly. I agree with the commander. We don't know enough about their capabilities to risk confrontation. Ilara drummed her fingers on the arm of her command chair. So we just tuck our tails between our legs and go home. Let them put us back in our box. Not necessarily, said Lieutenant Commander Raj Patel, the ship's tactical officer who had been quiet until now. Captain, during that transmission, I was analyzing their scanning patterns. They're incredibly systematic, almost predictable. There are blind spots in their sensor coverage, particularly when they change scanning frequencies. Ilara raised an eyebrow. You think we could evade them? Possibly, Patel replied. More importantly, I noticed something else. When you challenged the aliens' authority, there was a spike in communication between the approaching vessels. I think you surprised them. They've been watching us for 3,000 years, Dr. Okafor mused. Yet they seem to have a fundamental misunderstanding of human psychology. A slow smile spread across Ilara's face. They expect compliance because that's what their hierarchy demands. Proper behavior from lesser species. She turned to Patel. Can you identify the command ship? Already done, Captain. It's the largest vessel, positioned at the center of their formation. Open a channel, just to that ship, Ilara ordered. The alien appeared on screen again, seeming irritated by the renewed contact. Your instructions have been provided, human. Further communication is unnecessary. I just wanted to inform you that we've analyzed your sensor patterns and communication protocols, Ilara said casually. They're quite elegant in their simplicity. Very predictable. The alien scales seem to flatten against its skull. Your primitive scans can it. Also, Ilara continued, we've mapped the quantum resonance of your tunnel technology. Fascinating design. Our engineers are already theorizing how to replicate it. This was a bluff. They'd barely begun to understand the tunnel's operation, but the alien's reaction was immediate and revealing. All four eyes widened, and it made a sharp, clicking sound. Such technology is beyond your species' capability. It snapped. Your attempts toe. One more thing, Ilara interrupted again. We've been transmitting all our findings back to Earth since we arrived. Standard procedure for first contact scenarios. I expect Fleet Headquarters is analyzing the data as we speak. This was true, though with the quantum tunnel closed behind them, the transmission would take centuries to reach Earth through normal space. The alien, however, had no way of knowing this. Your deception is transparent, Captain Reed, the alien said, but uncertainty had crept into its voice. Is it? Ilara leaned forward in her chair. You've been watching us for 3 millennia, yet you seem surprised by our behavior. I wonder what else you've missed about humanity. The alien conferred with someone off-screen, speaking in a series of rapid clicks and whistles. Your vessel will be escorted to Outpost Zenith for further assessment, it finally declared. Resistance will result in immediate neutralization. The screen went dark again. Well, Chen said dryly, that wasn't the return trip they initially promised. No, Ilara agreed. It's better. They're taking us deeper into their territory. You consider that better? Dr. Okafor asked incredulously. Ilara nodded. They were going to send us home like children who wandered too far from the playground. Now they're bringing us in for a conversation. She turned to Torres. Set course to follow their lead vessel. Let's see what this galactic dominion is really all about. As the Odyssey moved forward, flanked by the crystalline alien ships, Ilara couldn't help but feel a mixture of trepidation and excitement. Humanity had just discovered they weren't alone in the galaxy, and more importantly, that they'd been kept in the dark about it for thousands of years. That was about to change. The challenge. Outpost Zenith loomed ahead, a massive structure unlike any human-made space station. Instead of the utilitarian design favored by Earth engineers, Zenith resembled a blooming crystal flower, with geometric petals extending from a central core that pulsed with blue-green energy. The scale was staggering. Each petal could house the entire Odyssey with room to spare. Magnificent, Dr. Okafor breathed as they approached. The engineering principles alone must be. We're receiving docking instructions. Torres interrupted, her eyes fixed on her console. They're directing us to what appears to be a containment bay in the station's lower quadrant. A quarantine area, Chen suggested. Or a prison, Patel added grimly. Captain Reed studied the station, noting the positioning of what appeared to be weapon emplacements and the movement patterns of smaller vessels around the structure. Follow their instructions, Lieutenant Torres, but maintain shield readiness and keep engines on standby. The Odyssey was guided into a vast chamber that sealed behind them. As the outer doors closed, the ship settled into a liquid-like substance that solidified around their hull, securing them in place. Some kind of adaptive docking mechanism, Dr. Okafor noted, running scans. It's conforming perfectly to our hull contours without applying damaging pressure. Captain, we're being hailed from the station, Torres reported. On screen, Ilara ordered, straightening her uniform. The view screen activated to show a different alien than before. This one had similar features but with gold-tinted scales and elaborate markings around its eyes. Its attire suggested higher rank, intricate metallic pieces that shifted color with its movements. I am Overseer Thrix of the Galactic Dominion, the alien announced. Your vessel has been secured for assessment. A delegation will board to evaluate your species' developmental status and determine appropriate action regarding your intrusion. Ilara nodded politely. We welcome your delegation, Overseer Thrix. We look forward to establishing a productive dialogue. Thrix made that same dismissive sound they'd heard from the first alien, something between a click and a hiss. There will be no dialogue, Captain. Your species will be evaluated according to established Dominion protocols. Prepare your primary command staff to receive evaluators. Before Ilara could respond, the transmission ended. Friendly bunch, Chen muttered. They're bureaucrats, Ilara replied, just with fancier technology. Dr. Okafor, what can you tell me about the atmosphere within the station? The science officer consulted his readings. Breathable for humans, Captain. Slightly higher oxygen content than Earth standard, but nothing dangerous. No detectable pathogens or toxins. Good. Commander Chen, you have the bridge. Lieutenant Patel, Dr. Okafor, you're with me. Let's go greet our hosts. The three officers made their way to the main airlock. As they approached, sensors indicated atmosphere equalization on the other side. The airlock cycled open to reveal a delegation of 5 aliens waiting in a corridor that seemed to be made of the same crystalline material as the station itself. Thrix stood at the center, flanked by 4 others of varying scale coloration. None carried visible weapons, but Ilara noted small devices attached to their forearms that pulsed with energy. Captain Reed, Thrix acknowledged with a slight inclination of its elongated head. You and your officers will follow. The rest of your crew will remain aboard your vessel until assessment is complete. My crew will follow standard protocols for diplomatic first contact situations, Ilara replied evenly. They'll maintain ship readiness while we engage in discussions. Thrix's upper eyes narrowed. You misunderstand your position, Captain. This is not a diplomatic meeting. Your species has violated Dominion space. You are here for assessment and processing, not negotiation. Ilara smiled pleasantly. Nevertheless, my crew will maintain standard protocols. Shall we proceed? The alien seemed momentarily taken aback by her calm defiance, but gestured for them to follow without further argument. The human officers were led through corridors that shifted and realigned as they walked, the crystalline structure of the station reconfiguring itself to create their path. Remarkable, Dr. Okafor murmured, scanning with his handheld device. The entire station appears to be semi-organic, responding to directed quantum signals. Your scanning device is unnecessary, one of the other aliens stated. All information deemed appropriate for your species will be provided during assessment. They were brought to a large chamber where several other alien species were visible, moving with purpose or interacting with floating displays of light and energy. Ilara noted with interest that the different species seemed to defer to the scaled aliens in a hierarchical manner. The assessment chamber, Thrix announced. Here, species are categorized according to Dominion classification protocols. The chamber contained various testing stations, each apparently designed to measure different aspects of development: technological, biological, cognitive, and social. At the center stood a raised platform surrounded by complex equipment. Your species has been preliminarily classified as Tier 5, Thrix explained, gesturing to illuminated markers that presumably indicated the tiered system. This assessment will confirm or adjust that classification. And what exactly does this classification determine? Ilara asked. A species tier determines its rights and responsibilities within the Dominion, Thrix replied. Tier 1 species serve as Dominion leadership. Tier 2 species manage significant administrative functions. Tier 3 species provide specialized services. Tier 4 species perform general labor and support roles. Tier 5 species remain in developmental monitoring until they demonstrate sufficient advancement for integration. Patel frowned. So it's a case system. It is an efficient allocation of resources based on evolutionary development and capability. Thrix corrected, seemingly offended by the characterization. Lower-tier species benefit from the guidance and protection of more advanced civilizations. And who decided the Dominion should be Tier 1? Dr. Okafor asked. The Dominion earned its position through natural superiority, another alien interjected. Our civilization achieved interstellar travel while your ancestors were still discovering basic agriculture. Ilara noted the defensive tone. Interesting. I see. And how long has this system been in place? The Galactic Dominion has maintained galactic stability for over 50,000 of your years, Thrix stated proudly. Before our ascendance, chaos and conflict were common. We brought order. At the cost of freedom and self-determination, Ilara observed. Thrix made a dismissive gesture. Primitive concepts. The collective benefits when each species accepts its appropriate role. The overseer moved toward the central platform. You will now undergo individual assessment. The tests began with basic biological scans, then progressed to technological knowledge evaluation, problem-solving exercises, and social scenario simulations. Throughout the process, Ilara and her officers answered questions and performed tasks while carefully observing the Dominion's methods and reactions. One test particularly caught Ilara's attention, a complex puzzle involving quantum entanglement that required participants to manipulate energy fields to create stable patterns. When it was her turn, she approached it differently than the prescribed method, using an intuitive approach rather than following the implied solution path. She completed it in half the expected time. The evaluators conferred, clearly surprised. You utilized an unorthodox approach, one stated, reviewing her performance. Is that a problem? Ilara asked innocently. The objective was to stabilize the pattern, which I did. The standard procedure is more efficient across multiple scenarios, the evaluator insisted. Perhaps for your physiological configuration, Dr. Okafor interjected. Human neurological patterns favor certain types of lateral thinking. We often find multiple solutions to complex problems. Throughout the assessment, Ilara noticed a pattern. The Dominion valued predictability and conformity above innovation. Their technological advancement was impressive, but it appeared to have developed along a single, carefully controlled trajectory. After several hours of testing, the evaluators withdrew to confer. Ilara and her officers were left waiting in a small chamber with transparent walls that afforded a view of the station's interior workings. Observations, she asked quietly. Their technology is centuries beyond ours, Dr. Okafor said, but they seem to apply it in remarkably rigid ways. There's little evidence of experimentation or divergent development paths. Patel nodded. Their security systems are impressive but predictable. They rely on overwhelmingly superior technology rather than adaptive tactics. And socially, Ilara added, they seem genuinely confused by our resistance to classification. It's as if they can't conceive of a species rejecting their hierarchy. Captain, Paddle said in a lower voice, I've been counting species. I've identified representatives from at least 12 different civilizations on this station alone, all deferring to the Dominion in various capacities. We're looking at a galactic-scale empire. Before they could discuss further, Thrix returned with several high-ranking Dominion officials. Their expressions were difficult to read, but their rigid postures suggested tension. Your assessment results are anomalous, Thrix announced. Your technological development remains clearly Tier 5, yet your problem-solving approaches and social cohesion metrics suggest higher capability. One of the other officials stepped forward. I am High Assessor Vex. Your species presents classification difficulties. You lack the technological refinement for Tier 4, yet you display cognitive patterns more typical of Tier 3 species. More concerning is your evident resistance to hierarchical integration. We call that independence, Ilara replied with a slight smile. Humans value self-determination highly, a developmental phase that most species outgrow. Vex dismissed. Efficient galactic civilization requires acceptance of natural order. Perhaps your definition of efficient differs from ours, Ilara suggested. Humanity has thrived precisely because of our diversity of thought and approach. We don't see uniformity as a strength. Vex's scales rippled in what might have been irritation. This attitude explained your chaotic developmental pattern. Your species advances unevenly, impressive leaps in some areas while maintaining primitive approaches in others. We call that innovation, Dr. Okafor interjected. Progress isn't always linear. The Dominion officials exchanged glances, communicating in subtle movements that the humans couldn't interpret. Finally, Thrix turned back to them. A consensus has been reached. Your species will remain classified as Tier 5, but will require special monitoring due to your unusual characteristics. You will be returned to your system with monitoring devices to ensure compliance with Dominion regulations regarding restricted space. Ilara crossed her arms. And if we choose not to comply? The question seemed to genuinely confuse the Dominion officials. Vex recovered first. Non-compliance is not an option available to Tier 5 species, the assessor stated flatly. Persistent violation of Dominion directives would necessitate corrective intervention. You mean military action, Patel clarified. If necessary, Vex confirmed. Though such measures are rarely required, most species recognize the benefits of Dominion oversight. Ilara was about to respond when alarms suddenly blared throughout the station. The crystalline walls pulsed with red light, and the Dominion officials immediately turned to floating displays that appeared in the air before them. What's happening? Ilara asked, but she was ignored as the aliens conferred urgently in their clicking language. Station breach in Sector 7, Patel translated quietly, having apparently picked up enough of their communication patterns to understand basic concepts. Something about, I think they're saying, containment failure. The station shuddered, and the lights briefly flickered. Whatever was happening, it was serious enough to disrupt even the advanced systems of the outpost. Thrix turned back to the humans, 4 eyes blinking rapidly in what might have been anxiety. You will return to your vessel immediately. Outpost Zenith is experiencing a Category 2 security incident. All non-essential personnel must evacuate affected sectors. Perhaps we can help, Ilara offered. What's the nature of the emergency? This does not concern Tier 5 species, Vex snapped. Return to your vessel as directed. Another, more violent shudder ran through the station. The walls around them briefly lost their crystalline solidity, becoming momentarily translucent before reforming. That didn't feel like a minor incident, Dr. Okafor observed. Your station's quantum structure is destabilizing. Vex and Thrix exchanged alarmed glances. Something in their demeanor shifted. The situation is becoming more complex, Thrix admitted reluctantly. A research specimen has escaped containment and is affecting the station's coherence matrix. What kind of specimen could affect an entire station's structural integrity? Ilara asked. A phase shifter, Vex replied after hesitation. A non-sentient entity that exists partially in quantum flux. Its presence disrupts ordered quantum states. Dr. Okafor's eyes widened. Fascinating. A naturally occurring quantum anomaly. Its nature is irrelevant, Vex said dismissively. Containment protocols will resolve the situation. As if to contradict this statement, another, stronger tremor shook the chamber. This time, portions of the wall failed to reform properly, leaving distorted sections that pulsed erratically. Your containment protocols don't seem to be working, Ilara observed. Dr. Okafor, thoughts. The science officer was already scanning with his device. If this entity exists in quantum flux, standard containment fields wouldn't be fully effective. You'd need to match its phase variance precisely. Our containment specialists are well aware of proper procedures, Thrix insisted, though with noticeably less confidence. Ilara recognized the situation for what it was. An opportunity. We've dealt with quantum anomalies before. Perhaps a fresh perspective might help. Vex started to object, but Thrix raised a hand to silence the assessor. What do you propose, Captain Reed? Let us access your sensor data on this phase shifter. Dr. Okafor is our foremost expert on quantum physics. He might see something your specialists have missed. The station shuddered again, more violently, and several Dominion officials who had been monitoring the situation approached Thrix with urgent reports. The entity is approaching the core matrix, one reported, not bothering to conceal the information from the humans. Projected station failure in 27 units if containment is not achieved. Thrix's scales flattened against its skull, a sign of stress Ilara had begun to recognize. Very well, Captain. Your scientist may examine the data, but understand that interference with Dominion operations without authorization carries severe penalties. Noted, Ilara replied simply. Dr. Okafor. The science officer stepped forward as Thrix directed him to a floating display. Information scrolled across it in alien script that suddenly shifted to English, another indication of how closely they'd been studying humanity. Fascinating, Dr. Okafor murmured as he examined the data. The entity isn't just in quantum flux. It's actively cycling through phase variations in a non-random pattern. He looked up at Thrix. You're trying to predict its next phase to trap it, correct? Thrix inclined its head slightly. That is the standard protocol for phase shifter containment. That won't work, Dr. Okafor stated confidently. The cycle isn't predictive. It's reactive. It's responding to your containment attempts and adjusting accordingly. He pointed to patterns in the data. See these variant spikes. They directly follow your field adjustments. You're essentially teaching it how to evade you. The Dominion officials conferred rapidly. Ilara could sense their reluctance to accept advice from a Tier 5 species, but their desperation was growing as the station continued to destabilize around them. What would you suggest? Thrix finally asked. Stop trying to match its phase, Dr. Okafor explained. Instead, create a resonance cascade that covers all possible phase states simultaneously. It won't be contained in the traditional sense, but it will become temporarily synchronized with normal spacetime. Such an approach would require reconfiguring the station's entire quantum matrix, one of the specialists objected. The protocols do not allow for such extensive. Your protocols are failing, Ilara interrupted. Sometimes unprecedented situations require unprecedented solutions. Vex bristled visibly. The Dominion has managed quantum anomalies for millennia. We do not require primitive species to. The station lurched dramatically, cutting off Vex's objection. Sections of the floor briefly became intangible, causing several aliens to sink partially through before the structure reformed. 20 units until critical failure. A specialist reported, panic evident despite the aliens' inhuman features. Thrix made a sharp, decisive gesture. Implement the human suggestion. Reconfigure the matrix. I'll need direct access to your control systems, Dr. Okafor said. The timing will be crucial. What followed was a tense collaboration as Dr. Okafor worked with Dominion specialists to reprogram the station's quantum resonance patterns. Ilara and Patil assisted where they could, but mostly observed the interaction between their science officer and the increasingly respectful alien technicians. As they worked, Ilara noticed representatives of other species watching with obvious interest. The rigid hierarchy was temporarily forgotten in the crisis, with expertise taking precedence over classification. Ready to initiate resonance cascade, Dr. Okafor announced after intense work. On my mark. 3, 2, 1, engage. The station hummed with energy as the reconfigured systems activated. For a moment, nothing seemed to happen. Then, like a wave spreading outward, a visible distortion rippled through the chamber. Where it passed, the erratic pulsing of the walls stabilized, returning to their normal crystalline appearance. The phase shifter has synchronized, a specialist confirmed, studying readouts with evident surprise. Quantum coherence is restabilizing throughout the station. Containment achieved, another reported. The entity is now visible in Sector 4 and maintaining phase synchronization. A collective tension eased from the Dominion officials. Fricks approached Dr. Okafor with what might have been newfound respect. Your solution was effective, the overseer acknowledged. Unorthodox, but effective. Sometimes the best solutions come from unexpected sources, Ilara commented, making eye contact with Vex, who had been the most dismissive of human capabilities. The High Assessor's posture remained rigid, but something had changed in its assessment. Your approach violated 17 established protocols, Vex noted, though without the previous contempt. Yet it succeeded where standard procedures failed. That's kind of our specialty, Ilara replied with a smile. Paradigm shift. In the aftermath of the phase shifter incident, the dynamics aboard Outpost Zenith shifted subtly but significantly. The Dominion officials maintained their formal adherence to protocol, but their interactions with the humans took on a more consultative tone. Other species on the station, representatives of the Dominion's tiered system, observed these interactions with evident interest. Captain Reed and her officers were no longer isolated in a holding area, but had been relocated to guest quarters typically reserved for Tier 3 diplomatic visitors. The implicit elevation in status wasn't lost on anyone. They're reassessing us, Ilara observed as she and her senior officers gathered in their new accommodations. The question is whether that works in our favor. They seem genuinely conflicted, Dr. Okafor noted. Their entire system is built on rigid classification, but we don't fit neatly into their categories. Which makes us unpredictable, Patil added, and potentially dangerous, from their perspective. A soft chime announced a visitor. The doorway reconfigured itself, revealing a Dominion official they hadn't met before, smaller than Thrix or Vex, with pale green scales and simpler adornments.